Hey friends, welcome back. And welcome back to my series on how to study anything. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive guide on how to study history through my years of experience as well as my thoughts on how to most effectively study the subject of history. In this video, we're not only going to be covering how to study history, but also how to study it fast and effectively. I've laid out a step-by-step process for you to follow. So without further ado, let's get started. Now first, I should share my credentials with you, so you know that I know what I'm talking about. Basically, I have a great passion for history. And you can see that in some of the videos that I've put up on this channel. I'll list the thumbnails over here. And the other thing is, I studied history back in 10th grade and I got an A star in it, or 96 percentile to be exact, which was, I believe, one of the highest in the school. So enough about tooting my own horn, but I hope now you know that I know what I'm talking about when I talk about history. Alright, first things first. The absolute first thing you must do when you're starting to study history is learn the basics of effective studying. So if you haven't already, check out my video on how to study effectively or how to study anything. I'll put the thumbnail here and the link will be in the description and in the comment section below. So before proceeding any further, maybe pause this video, watch that video, try and understand what it says, and then come back here. Now that you've watched the video on the basics of effective studying, you already have a pretty solid foundation. From this point on, I'm only going to be giving a few subject specific tips, things that will take your history studying to the next level. Remember, the foundation is always the same. The fundamentals, the first principles of effective studying are always what I've mentioned in that previous video. So the next thing you should do when you're beginning to study history is recognize that it is a very content heavy subject, meaning lots of facts, lots of details, lots of stuff to memorize. So how can you make this easier for yourself? Surprise, you have to find a way to cut down on the amount of stuff that you need to know. In some cases, this is very plausible. For example, in my IGCSE or in my 10th grade boards, I chose to not study one entire section of the textbook because I knew that if I could study the other 5 really well, then I would be set for the exam. And sure enough, it worked. So similarly, find this out for yourself. What are the parts of the syllabus that you absolutely detest, that have a very low probability of coming in the exam, that are really repetitive or boring or something? Or what are the parts of the syllabus that are really easy even though you hate them and which are guaranteed to come? Obviously you have to study the stuff that is important first, or the stuff that will get you the marks easily, and you have to leave the really boring or the really tedious or the really useless stuff out and never touch it. This you have to establish right at the beginning, so you don't waste time trying to figure out which part of the textbook I'm going to study and all. Obviously leave some time for the teacher to explain what it is and all, but eventually you have to make a decision if you're allowed to in your exam syllabus. Well, if you have to study everything, that's too bad. So we'll move on to the next things you can do. Now over here, I want to emphasize where you're going to study from. And the answer is surprisingly not Wikipedia. Yes, for sure, Wikipedia is really interesting, and I myself spend around half of my day on it, researching random history topics, eventually reaching the Chilean Republic and Honduras and all sorts of countries in Latin America. But in this day and age, most of the knowledge is still contained in books, specifically textbooks. And no, your school textbook or whatever they issue you at school is not the default. You have to ask around, ask your friends, most specifically your friends who passed that course, to find out which are the absolute best textbooks. You have no idea how much time I've wasted, how much effort I've spent in trying to learn history from the shitty school textbooks that my school gave me. So please don't waste time. Only go with the best. This is education here. You can afford to spend that extra $40 or $50 on buying a decent textbook which will actually help you score marks, instead of some textbook which is inherently limiting the amount you can reach or creating a glass ceiling beyond which you can't go. Now the next concept to be really aware of, and this applies to all kinds of history, no matter what you're studying, is the big picture, or the idea of cause and effect. How I used to approach history was, I used to look at it like a tapestry, meaning there's all these threads of cause and effect, and I would like to trace those threads in this big tapestry from one end to the other. As in, why did the Cold War start? Why did the USA have a natural suspicion of the USSR? If you can understand why conservatives and liberals are naturally opposing each other, then there are fewer things to memorize, because these are just some basic first principles from which you will be able to understand far greater things. Now, I don't have any experience with like Asian syllabi, local Asian syllabi, but from what I have heard, that this is a great problem in those kinds of contexts, because you aren't taught the bigger picture. So if you find that you aren't seeing the bigger picture, or maybe a too biased version of history or something, then make sure you do the adequate research to properly understand why everything is and how everything fits together, like a massive jigsaw puzzle or something. A tapestry, a jigsaw puzzle, however you want to see it. Just see the bigger picture. Now we come to the part of the video, which is probably why you're here in the first place. Memorizing dates and details. This, my friends, is the bread and butter of history. Just sprinkling them into your essays or properly integrating them into your essays and your answers means you're basically guaranteed like the top marks, because this is what history boils down to. Detail, 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 dates, dates, dates. So the first method, which you could probably use, but which I didn't have great success with, is the association method. Basically, it's this form in which, this is for dates, by the way. You choose like some image or something for each of the 100 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going all the way to 100, and then you create some image in your mind for that particular date, like 1972 or something. Personally, I didn't find much success with this. I think it is a really tedious and cumbersome process. So my alternative to this, which I heartily recommend to you because it worked for me, is just create a Word document and create a massive monster like master timeline of all the key dates. Before that, you should decide on what level of detail do you want. Do you want day, month, year, or are you alright with just the year? Or in some very rare cases, you could be fine with just the decade. After you've decided on what level of detail do you want, as you're going through the syllabus, as you're going through the material, keep adding all the key dates or the dates you want to remember to this timeline, along with a line or two describing what it stands for. And I can't emphasize how useful this technique is, because this contextual memory, such as knowing that the Iran-Iraq war happened in 1980 to 1988, and the Iranian Revolution happened 1979, and then there's this period of 10 years between that. If you can put things into perspective, it makes remembering those things far easier. In addition to this mind map method, I heartily recommend creating flashcards, very specific flashcards, such as what was the name of the Shah of Iran before the Iranian Revolution, and the back of it will say Shah Muhammad Shah Reza Pahlavi or whatever his name was. You get what I mean? Not an entire paragraph of description on who the Shah was and what he did and who his sons were and where he died. Just one detail per paragraph. Now, the other study technique, which is ideal for remembering all these things and making connections, is history-specific mind maps. So what you want to do is make connections and go on an active recall spree. You just want to do a mind dump, like maybe choose the topic in the center. I used to make mind maps like, policy towards women in Nazi Germany, and in that you put it in the center. So you can think of various different aspects of it, such as policies towards married women, policies towards school children or education. So that's all for this video, guys. I recommend that you watch the other videos in this series so you can further improve your study technique, your study skills, your habits, and that way it will have a big wonderful snowball effect, because suppose you're studying physics easier, that makes studying history easier because you've got less pressure and more time, and vice versa. So as always, I'll catch you next time, and remember to share and subscribe.